This podcast acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waters throughout Australia where we record this podcast. We pay our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and the Ngunnawal people and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and their elders past and present.
We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people whose lands we operate.
Hello and welcome to Day 1, the Maddocks podcast talking all things clerkship and commercial law related. You're joined by Maddocks lawyers Sophie, Edgar and Sam Ejtemai, and we are your new official hosts for this season of Day 1. We are so excited for you to see what we have in store for you this season. We've been sitting down with partners from across the firm, asking all the questions we wish we knew when we were applying for clerkships. But before we get into all the good stuff, hello, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
How are you?
Great. Really excited for to be a podcast host. This is going to be a really exciting series.
I know. It's exciting to finally be sitting down and recording our first episode.
Yeah. No, it is good. We've been busy planning.
Busy in the background.
Yeah, planning a couple episodes, getting it all sorted. I think it's going to be a really useful resource for those that are tuning in and those that are applying for clerkships or graduate roles or looking to join Maddocks. I think I've learned some new things about the firm and it's going to be some exciting content.
It's a good little toolbox, I think, to give you some extra tips and tricks, because we certainly wish we had this when we went through the process. So hopefully you take something from it.
Absolutely. So why don't we, before we dive into the nitty gritty, why don't we talk a little bit about our journeys to Maddocks and how we got here?
Yeah, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So I studied law at Deakin University with yourself. I don't think our paths crossed at uni, but yeah, I'm a deacon. I studied just a Bachelor of Law, no double degree. I finished university in 2021. During university, I applied for clerkships and did a couple of clerkships, including one at Maddocks in January of 2021, which was
the dreaded year.
The pandemic year. So writing applications in the thick of lockdown here in Melbourne, and did my clerkship at Maddocks over January, February, which for the most part was in person, except we had a 5-day snap lockdown, if you can not block that out of your memory. Yeah, we left here on a Thursday afternoon and came back Tuesday. So that was a very unique experience. During my clerkship, I rotated. So Maddocks does 2 rotations in the clerkship, which we'll come to at some point. But I did property and development and construction and projects. Started my graduate year in 2022 and rotated again through construction and projects, property development and banking and finance, all very fun areas. And I've now settled in construction and projects.
And here we are.
And here I am as a first-year lawyer in construction and projects.
Do you want to take us back a little bit further? You have an accent.
Yes, I do. I do have an accent. It's kind of hybrid twang now because I moved from Canada when I was 15. So I finished high school here to get a little bit of that Aussie influence. So when I go back home to Canada, they say I sound Australian. Here I sound Canadian. And in Europe, they have no idea where I'm from. So that's a little bit of my background. How about you, Soph? You've had a little bit of a different journey here to Maddocks.
Yeah, so my journey, not quite so linear. I had a different pathway to Maddocks. So I, as you mentioned, am a fellow Deakin alumni. I graduated in 2021 and, like yourself, was applying for clerkships during the dreaded COVID lockdown. Yeah. So when you think about it, our application should have been phenomenal because we had nothing but time on our hands, but I'm not sure that it played out that way.
Oh, I can say for a fact mine was not phenomenal.
So anyway, I actually didn't clerk at Maddocks. I clerked at 2 different firms, and then come offer day, I wasn't successful in receiving graduate offers from those firms. So I reached out to my network that I had made during uni, and also mainly the connections that I'd made during those 2 other clerkships. And those connections is actually how I ended up here with a graduate role. So yeah, that's how we did it.
And you've now settled in as a first-year lawyer, and you've rotated through a couple teams?
Yeah, exactly. So I rotated through employment law, commercial and the development team in my graduate year, and I have settled in the corporate and private clients team and haven't looked back.
There you go.
Yeah,
happy days.
I know.
And here we are. And how much better is, and I say how much better is, but I had a great time at university, but how nice is it to be settled and you found a place and found a team that you really enjoy? University is so much fun. Like both of us were at Deakin, and Deakin, it's just such a great university.
It's great because you learn a lot at uni, but it's also so good to be in a law firm where you learn so many different things, and it really there's a big difference between what you learn at uni and what you're taught here at Maddocks. So it's really nice to sort of be in that practical environment.
Yeah.
And kickstart our careers, hey?
Totally. It's it is very exciting.
So now that you've settled, looking back on your graduate year and your time at Maddocks so far, what's your highlight been?
It's been such a whirlwind the last 18 months. It's been so much fun. There's been tons of highlights. Like, it's cliche to say the people, but the people are excellent. Like, you build your network, you build your friends, it's like, funny enough and not planned, over Christmas I went back to Europe and bumped into Soph in London just casually. Not something I would have had experienced had I not come here. But I think a highlight, like work-related highlight, during my time in the property development team. The property development team here at Maddocks is very, very unique and does very cool work. And we'll hear about it a little bit later in our sector interviews with Adam, who's one of the partners in that team. But they represent like 70% of all new developments in Victoria. I don't know if that stat is 100% correct, so don't quote me on it, but it's a large number. Like, if you look out to the Melbourne skyline, you get to see some really iconic,
incredible team.
Incredible. Australia 108, Melbourne Quarter, some of the really big developments that
huge development,
iconic to Melbourne. Another one that we're representing is Beulah by Southbank, which is going to be the new tallest tower. It's going to be this, I think they call it like a garden in the sky, and the top 2 floors are going to be like this public garden, and I think there's going to be this really luxury 5-star hotel up the top, and then like some penthouses. It's going to be really cool.
And you worked on their contracts, didn't you?
Yeah, so they did a launch day where they're selling all the off the plan apartments, and I think they set some record of like $350 million in a day where they sold. And it was me and I think it was like 7 other graduates from our cohort. We went down and we were in the back doing the sort of prepping the contract. When I say prepping the contracts, like as much as a graduate can, sort of like finalizing the details as it was coming in. It was so much fun.
That's the type of stuff I think when you're at law school you dream of, and you think how exciting to be a part of something like that, where you're in the back end and you imagine all these contracts coming in and out and you're doing all of your work. So must have been a pretty exciting time.
It was something that, absolute highlight.
Brilliant.
So if I know you've had some very cool experiences at Maddocks as well, what's been your highlight so far?
I have had so many cool experiences here at Maddocks that it's so hard to pinpoint one highlight because there's just so many. So I think my highlight so far is more of a broad one, and I think it's so exciting that I was a person who, coming into my graduate year and coming out of uni, my background was actually I'd worked in criminal law for a little while, and I knew that that's not something that I wanted to continue. So I was really interested in coming into a commercial law firm, but what team exactly I wanted to work in, I had no idea. So I think doing the graduate year and rotating through the employment, commercial and development team, when I started, I thought that I was definitely going to be an employment lawyer, just sort of linking the ties between criminal and employment, being people focused and that front and back end work as well. I was really drawn to, but it's been a massive highlight for me to go through the rotations. And actually a wild card was that I loved the corporate and private clients team. I love the work. I love the transactional nature of it. So I think my highlight's been coming to the end of the process and finding a team that I feel settled in, that I really am excited to continue and have a long career in. So it's nice to sort of reach that point where you feel like you may have things a little bit more figured out than I did 12 months ago, although there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, no, totally. And what a lovely team. Like, that's such a great team. Really exciting work. The people are lovely. It's you're gonna be very happy in that team. It's funny you say that you feel a little bit more in control. I have often found from starting as a seasonal clerk, you have like imposter syndrome, and you feel like you're doing things and you don't feel like you're making progress.
Absolutely.
But then you look back 6 months and you look at the work that you did, and then you look at the work you do now, and then you're like, oh, I've made progress. And it's nice to reflect at the end of the graduate year, now that you've settled and you kind of where you started the graduate year, how much you've developed. And kudos to Maddocks for putting on such a great graduate program and the learning and development that we get to undertake. It's exciting. I'm looking forward to the next couple of years.
Yeah, as am I.
You touched on like not knowing what you don't know coming in and thinking you're going to settle in one area and going into another. I mean, how many times in uni, I mean, I remember.
You change your mind every single day.
Oh my God, yeah. I thought I was going to be an M&A lawyer because I thought that's what the cool people do.
It is.
Yeah, which is absolutely true. But then I realized that when I started, and I did a clerkship in another firm, and I did M&A, and I just realized it wasn't the area for me.
Yeah.
But a question we get asked so often is, what do we do at Maddocks? Like,
Yeah.
what does some of the teams do? When I say I'm a projects and construction lawyer, what does that actually mean? Yeah, what does that mean? And if you get an answer, let me know. But to help decipher that, we've done a couple of interviews.
We have. So we completely understand that it can be really challenging to actually look through different firms' websites and discover what it is that firms do, and it can be overwhelming at the start. So we have introduced for this season of Day One sector interviews, which we'll be dropping at the end of each episode, just to give you a little bit more insight and debunk any misconceptions that you may have, to help you work out the areas that you may or may not be interested and where you want to go to ask further questions.
Totally. If I can give one piece of advice to the uni students that are listening, is private practice is very different, and in a very good way different to university studies. So, if
property is one of the best examples of that. Like, I know from my experience, property law at uni was not the subject for me. It was not something that I was overly excited by. But, you and I have both been through the development team, and how different is it?
Yeah, it's night and day. Like, you need to know some of the concepts that they do, but it's a commercial team, and you're working with real commercial problems on some of the most interesting, exciting deals happening in Victoria. And it's just,
so keep an open mind, I guess, is what we definitely want to emphasize is keep an open mind, because your experiences from uni don't always translate into private practice. And that's what we really hope you can take away from these sector interviews, so that you could get a little bit more of an insight into what it does look like in private practice.
Absolutely, Soph. And I think, we've touched on a little bit now and what the purpose of the podcast is going to be, but it's going to center around the clerkship process and what that daunting word might actually entail for some of our listeners, as well as, the entries into the actual clerkships and the graduate program and all that sort of stuff. So,
having been through the process, both you and I, fairly recently, we completely sympathise with how overwhelming it can seem, and especially when you're starting out and you're looking at applying to different firms, and it really is like that feeling of, where do I even start and where do I begin? So we just want you to know that it's not all doom and gloom. It's actually such an exciting time of your career, where you really get to experience what it might be like working in a commercial law firm, and use the process to your advantage. Work out if it's something that you want to do, and get to know people. I mean, I know you've got great stories from the connections that you've made during your clerkships that you're still in contact with.
Absolutely. It's everyone thinks it's a very competitive process, and the nature of it sometimes can be, but it's 99% of the time it's not. And you actually end up meeting like-minded people that are going through a very shared, similar experience. And a lot of my friends that I've developed over the last couple of years have come from clerkships or experiences at other firms. And, whether we have ended up at Maddocks together or haven't ended up at Maddocks, you meet a lot of very interesting and like-minded people, and it is actually a very fun experience to go through. So it may feel daunting, but it's also a very exciting couple of months and couple of years in the making.
It definitely is. So what's in store?
What's next? Great question, Soph. I think we're gonna dive into the nitty-gritty over the coming season of episodes. We're going to talk a lot about why Maddocks and why it's a great place to work. We're going to obviously talk a bit more detail about the clerkship process, the applications, the networking, how to get a clerkship at Maddocks, and what a clerkship actually looks like at Maddocks. We've got a lot of special guests, which we're really looking forward to. We've got Dave Newman, the CEO. We've got Mon Barrett and Sam Judd from Sydney, who are the head of the clerkship and graduate recruitment processes, and a variety of other partners from different sector areas, which, speaking of, we've got some very special guests with us here today that we should just dive right into.
Yeah, absolutely. Today we are joined by two very special guests. We have Adam Jaques, who is a partner in the development team, and we also have Michael Taylor-Sands, who is a partner in the tax and structuring team. Both Adam and Michael are also graduate partners and have played a very big role in our journeys throughout the last year, and we couldn't wait to put them on the podcast today and sit down and talk all things about the property development sector. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Michael and Adam. So to kick us off, Adam, I think the most popular question that we get asked by clerks is about the development team, what it does, who you work with, who your clients are. So could you maybe shed some light on the development team for us?
Sure, Sophie, and thanks for having us. So I'm Adam Jaques. I'm a partner in the Maddocks property development team, so commonly known around the firm as the development team. But our focus, and almost quite uniquely in the Australian market, is on the private property development industry. So working with the developers from large institutional clients like Mirvac and AV Jennings and Stocklands, household names, right down to smaller family-owned groups. And what we do is we assist those private developers to deliver critical infrastructure that we need as a society, such as housing, industrial property, commercial property like hotels and retail property and offices and things like that. So we work with them through the whole life cycle of a project, from acquiring a site, doing the due diligence, through to structuring up their vehicles through which they deliver these projects, and then right through to the delivery phase and the final settlements where they make their modest profits.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. It's quite an impressive team, having been fortunate enough to rotate through as a seasonal clerk and as a graduate. It's a lot of fun and unique work that team does, which is very unique to Maddocks, as you said. Michael, leading on from that, can you maybe elaborate a little bit about what your tax team here does? Obviously, tax plays a really big part in the property market in Australia, but how that plays in with the development team, but also some of the other tax work that your team does?
Happy to. So the tax team is not part of the development group development team that Adam just spoke about. We're a team that sits within the commercial group, but just by virtue of the nature of what we do, we work quite closely, as in virtually every day of the week. I have multiple conversations with partners and senior associates and others within Adam's team on a range of issues. And the role we play, in some respects, it's auxiliary, in the sense that the transactions they're doing, just because the realities of the Australian tax system at both a federal and a state level, the realities is that it's very hard to transact property in Australia without tax advice. And the tax advice is similar to what Adam's just touched on. It can be related to the vehicle or the structure in which the property is to be housed in order to deliver it for the stated purpose. But it's also tax advice around usually the upfront state taxes. So duty, GAEC, land tax, GST is also upfront, but it's federal. So in order for clients to come up with a price and a model by which they're going to transact a property, they need to understand what the tax incidence is going to be and what the timing of that tax is going to be, in order to plug it into their feasibility, to understand what they're going to pay in terms of Australian tax on the transaction they're doing. So we will typically assist someone like Adam and anyone else in his group with all the tax drafting in the contract of sale. So that would typically touch on GST, it would touch on land tax, depending on the type of land. It might touch on GAEC, might touch on rezone tax, that sort of stuff. And also talk to them about the vehicle in which the property is going into, and how the tax and risk will just play out over the life cycle of the development. So that's more or less our main input into the development team.
Thanks, Michael. I might just ask both of you, because I know the team does work on some really significant property and big transactions here in Melbourne. Can you maybe each of you just talk about some of the high-profile properties that you've worked on? Adam, I know you've done a lot of work with Australia 108 over the years, and Michael similarly. So maybe touch on some of those really interesting examples, just to give our listeners some idea of the scale of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, sure, Sam. I'm more than happy to share some stories. So I joined the development team 10 years ago as a junior associate, 10 years this year, and it's a good example of how the relatively junior lawyers can get involved in some of the really important work we do as a firm. And so within the first few months of me joining the team, some Singaporean developers came to town and wanted to buy a significant asset to build a large tower on, and they settled on what is now Australia 108 in South Bank, which is the tallest residential tower in the Southern Hemisphere. And we did what the development team does right through the life cycle of that project. We helped them with their acquisition. We helped them with tax advice, bringing in Mike and his colleagues. We helped them with the sales campaign, both advising on their marketing materials, but also preparing the off-the-plan contracts of sale for that project. And then we went on what is still going as essentially a 10-year journey with the client to develop an amazing building and what ended up being over $1 billion worth of apartments. And we completed all of those transactions on behalf of the clients. And it's really been a career-defining project for me, but it's just one example of the type of work that comes in the door on a fairly regular basis to our team and to the firm in the space of the development sector.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. It is a very big part of the Melbourne iconic skyline. You touched on some of the exciting work that juniors get to do. Michael, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how a junior coming in, whether that's in the commercial tax team with you or in the development team with Adam, how they get to collaborate across the different teams at Maddocks to see the life cycle of a project similar to Australia 108 or other alike projects.
Yeah, so the model at Maddocks is we'll usually partner up a junior with either a senior associate or a partner. So the idea is that a junior, depending on whether they're coming from Adam's angle, which is the property angle, or whether they're coming at from my angle, which is more of the tax angle, they get exposure to a subset of issues that I might be dealing with or a subset of issues that Adam might be dealing with. And the idea is to start them off with some discrete issues and then build them up over the course of a couple of years so that they get exposure to the whole gamut of issues. Because in property, the properties are different, the deals are different, but the issues are, I wouldn't say routine, but the same stuff comes up over and over again. And the idea is, in the way of developing juniors, is certainly it's not a sink or swim approach from the outset. It's exposing them to discrete issues and then building them into, when they get to a senior associate or above, they've dealt with years worth of issues and they've got an awareness of helping identify the issue and treat the issue and what the possibility is in terms of, and what the options are in terms of outcomes. And so someone who may be a senior associate after 5 or 6 years of working on transactions in a collaborative way will be more or less across all of the issues. They may not necessarily have all the answers. They may need assistance from a partner or someone else. But the idea is that they have an awareness and they have the means and the knowledge to deal with the issues. And whether it's a junior in Adam's team or a junior in my team, it's fair to say most of Adam's juniors and most of my juniors are all on first name terms. They deal with each other regularly. It wouldn't be unusual for Adam to send me an email and say, look, we need this looked at. He may or may not spot the issues. He may just say, can you deal with this? I will then say, well, okay, based on what you've sent, we need to deal with X, Y, and Z. And I'll in turn flick that on to one of my juniors and say, look, can you at least resolve X? I'll look at Y and Z, or I might give them all. It just really depends. And then that junior will normally, from the email chain, we'll see that Adam's already got either a senior associate or a junior partnering with him. So there'll be a separate line of communication at that lower level between the juniors. And because that occurs day in, day out on transactions which are not routine, but they have a similar theme to them, there's a build-up of relationships across the group, and that in turn feeds into knowledge of clients. All of Adam's partners, I work on all of their matters, they work on all of mine, and the juniors in the respective groups do that as well. So we more or less go to market, as Adam said, with a complete development solution, and tax and structuring is an essential part of that solution, in the same way banking and finance, construction, and so forth. So there's an enormous amount of collaboration across the groups.
And I think that genuine collaboration is at the core of that experience, not just for the junior lawyers, and that starts from the graduates and the first year lawyers right the way through their careers, but also it's the experience for the clients as well. And the client feedback is that they love that we work as a team, we work with each other, and they know that we will pick up all of the issues that need to be picked up, and it makes it a lot easier for them than dealing with multiple firms or multiple teams in different silos around their one project. And what that also creates is opportunities for the junior lawyers to make connections across the whole firm, which is great for future collaboration opportunities, but it's also great for their careers because they build a cohort of colleagues across the firm and all different teams that work with the same clients and that work on the same projects, and that's great for the future career, because what we hope with our junior lawyers coming through is that they'll want to be here for a long time and that they might want to be partners in the firm in the future. And I've got colleagues that started around the same time as me 10 years ago at Maddocks that are now partners with me in the firm, and we know each other really well, and we're genuinely friends, which is a great experience.
And I think I'd also add to that, being in a law firm, one of the, clearly everyone has a certain body of knowledge, but another important part of the practice is when you don't have the knowledge, knowing where to go to get the knowledge. A good lawyer is one that can not only solve a problem through their own means, but can also bring in others upon identifying that the problem is beyond their particular skill set and their offering. It's really that multidisciplinary, multi-practice offering that more or less leads to collaboration, but also provides for better client outcomes. As Adam said, it's not the siloed approach. It's an overall cohesive approach. And in all honesty, I wouldn't be surprised if half of my clients thought I was a property lawyer. They know I do tax and they know I do structuring, but they think of me as, in the same way they'll think of Adam, I'm just another head dealing with a property transaction. So that's a pretty good sign of how cohesive it all is.
From a junior's perspective, both Sam and I have had the benefit of rotating through both the development and the commercial teams during our grad year. And it certainly is one of the most exciting aspects of being a junior and getting to rotate through the teams is when you do see the cross collaboration and you go and get to expand your network. And when you're sort of a junior and just entering into the firm, building that network and working across the teams provides your day-to-day with a lot of excitement, as funny as that may seem. So it also is a great way for you to, even if you just experience one of the teams, it's a really good way as well to be able to get a taste for property and the property sector here at Maddocks and know where to direct your questions and who to speak to if you do have a query. I guess leading on from that, we know that there's quite a bit of noise in the market at the moment about the property industry and the rising interest rates and property in general. We are keen to hear your thoughts from both of you, actually, just on what trends you're seeing amongst your clients, what the general feels about this is, and how you think that your clients will be navigating that in the next few years.
Sophie, I think there's definitely challenges. Actually, I might just start by saying we enjoyed having both of you in the development team, even though neither of you decided to settle with us. We'll just keep your pictures, your portraits on the wall downstairs to remind us of what you look like. But look, there's definitely challenges in the industry at the moment, and the recent sad news about the Porter Davis Group is definitely an example of that, where the supply chains and the increased construction costs undermined by fixed price contracts got the better of that organisation, and that definitely dents the general market's confidence. But speaking to our clients, and like I said earlier, our clients are big household names, publicly listed companies, right through to smaller private development groups. There's a real positivity about the future and the relatively short-term future with interest rates, cash rate seeming to be stabilising. I think the construction costs are starting to stabilise now as well. And so really the damage that was done by fixed price contracts entered into quite some time ago when the construction costs rose. With those stabilising and then record overseas and interstate migration coming back to the property market, our clients are gearing up. They're buying sites. They're active in the wholesale market to buy the land that they will need to develop in the short to medium term to pick up that demand that's coming. So it's a very positive story in our team. We're busy and we need good graduates to come in and help us. Mike, what's your experience?
I've been working in the property industry for 20 or 30 years now, and I've gone through, the Asian economic crisis, the GFC, COVID, and a few other cycles. And at the moment, this year is no doubt there's a trough. And there's no doubt that some clients are going to bunker down and just get through the year for all the reasons that Adam's just mentioned. But fundamentally, what I think of in terms of the next 10 years is Melbourne is going to, as a city, will outsize Sydney. For that to happen, there's going to be a lot more people living here. For those people to live here, there's going to need to be a lot more infrastructure. There's going to be a lot more residential housing, both in a built form tower and also city ring. There'll be a lot of densification, and then in terms of the master planned estates, and fundamentally part of the reason why Melbourne will outgrow, or it's predicted to outgrow Sydney in the next 10 to 15 years, is because Melbourne's surrounded by so much flat developable land, whereas Sydney is constrained. So all those people have got to live somewhere. There's going to be a lot more housing. There's going to be a lot more factories. There's going to be a lot more retail and commercial property to support the whole model of growth. And that's where we come in. I don't expect this cycle, it'll go for this year, and sure, clients are withholding supply because they don't want to sell at the bottom of the market, whether they're doing, retail or, resi sales or whatever. But fundamentally, I think the outlook is still extremely positive from a Melbourne point of view for all the reasons we've both mentioned.
And we've definitely also seen a real push to the regions that accelerated hard during COVID. And while it's come off a little bit, it's definitely entrenched now. And that's going to be, I think, capitalised on by the 2026 Commonwealth Games, which will be in regional hubs like Geelong and Ballarat and Bendigo and Traralgon, which is a really exciting opportunity for the development industry, because there's a lot that needs to be built to put on something like a Commonwealth Games in a very short time frame in development terms. So we're already well placed in our firm to support those regional developers and all the other work that's going to have to go with the major events like the Commonwealth Games. So that's an exciting opportunity for graduates coming into the firm to get involved in as well.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Adam. It's great to have such depth of knowledge being spoken to here, and I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. Sophie and I could probably pick your brains for a couple of hours on the property market and the way things are turning, but I might take a quick pivot in direction, as both of you, as well as your roles as partners within your respective sectors, also wear the hat of graduate partners and are very involved in graduate recruitment here at Maddocks. So I know our listeners will be really keen on any tips as they're preparing their clerkship applications, and for those that are successful in getting through with interviews. What makes a potential applicant stand out to you guys, both in their written applications, but also in any sort of networking or interview type scenario?
I've been doing it for a few years now. It's almost a given that everyone who makes it through to the interview stage, they're all smart. They've all the standard model of they've done well in secondary school. They've gone on to one of the universities, usually in Melbourne, but also from other states, increasingly so now. But they've all done well at a university level. They've worked hard. They've got good marks, and they present well, and they can write an application letter. So that's all. Everyone's more or less coming in at an even level in that respect. I think what stands out, though, in a one-on-one or a two-on-two conversation in an interview is someone who has perspective on life, perspective on their experiences, perspective on the profession, some degree of insight into what they're looking to do and what they're looking to get into in terms of the firm, so perspective on the firm. Someone with EQ, so IQ is just a given to be in that seat. Everyone is smart. Smarter than me, but it's the EQ that I think you notice. A bit of ingenuity is good. It was the case back in my day. We more or less just went to uni and had part-time jobs in the local botlo or whatever and did nothing. But we have people come here who have, they've run businesses, they've got apps, they've got this, they've got that, and they're empire builders within their own galaxy, so to speak. In addition to that, they also want to be a lawyer. So that's usually impressive. And just some real life experience as well. Some travel, someone who I'm always impressed by, someone who's had the courage to defer midstream and just take a year off and do something else in a different part of the world. And come back with perspective and some ability to reflect on and so forth. I think that makes for a more interesting and more rounded candidate. So I'd encourage anyone to get off the hamster wheel for a year or two. That normally gives them something interesting to talk about and reflect on.
I agree with all of that. I'm just enjoying the picture of you working in a bottle-o while you're at uni as well. That would have been an interesting experience. For me, look, like I said, I agree with everything Mike said there. I'm consistently impressed by the people that we get to meet as grad partners and that come through the application process as seasonal clerks and graduate candidates at Maddocks. And I think what I take away, just to add to what everything Mike said, is that if people can find the confidence to be themselves and to be genuine in that process and impress their personality on us rather than what they think we might be looking for or that we might want to hear, then that really shines through. It really shines through. So that's what I'd encourage everyone to do.
And I'd also add to that, I think, we get an awful lot of applications. Some people will apply to a broad spectrum of firms, and I completely understand why they do that. I think a good candidate is someone who has a level of honesty. They've made a decision as to why they're applying to a firm like Maddocks as opposed to one of the other big firms. They may still apply to a bigger firm or a smaller firm, but they've got an honesty as to which one they really prefer. That is, with a couple of pointed questions, it's not easy, but it's possible to kind of work out whether someone is more or less just surveying everything with a view to getting a job anywhere, or someone who really wants to work at a place like Maddocks. It's something that you develop a skill at, kind of deciphering between different candidates as they come through.
It's very useful tips. So thank you both for sharing your insights there. It can be a very overwhelming and stressful time when candidates and students are looking to start the process. And at the beginning, you can think you don't know where to start and you don't know where to start looking for information. So if anything, we encourage any listeners to take that advice on board, and along with the rest of the resources that Maddocks put out, definitely make the most of the information that's out there so that you can really nail those interviews and applications. Our final question that we had for you both was just if you had any final parting words of wisdom for students who may be thinking that they're interested in the property sector generally or are keen to learn more about the industry. What recommendations would you give, or where would you suggest that they look to find out more?
Well, if law student is interested in property and property development specifically, the first thing is not to be discouraged by the study of property law to start with. It's not the practice of property law, and particularly in the development space, is much more commercial and broad than the black letter law, and it's certainly important to know it, but it'd certainly be a bit dry as a subject matter, whereas the practice is anything but. I would just encourage also people to take a broad interest. Look at developments, property assets that interest you, look at the marketing materials, try to understand it. The property developers that we work with, and my general experience is that they love talking about their projects. So you could even reach out to developers and ask them directly about their projects, and there'll be most often a marketing person within that firm that would be happy to talk to them, I'm sure. And also just read widely. Our team, the development team, publishes a lot in the sector, and we've got a quarterly newsletter that's sent out called The Lot, which is a great resource, and that is openly available on the Maddocks website. And also there's good property reporters in the press, particularly the Australian Financial Review. I find that really do unpack some of the issues really well. So I think that'd be a great starting point.
Well, Michael and Adam, thank you so much for joining us here today. We know you're both very busy, and we really appreciate your time coming on here, and I'm sure the listeners got a lot out of that. That wraps up episode 1. For those listening, stay tuned for episode 2, which is one of our absolute favorites of the season, where it's such a goodie. We sat down with CEO Dave Newman, who shed some light on the new Maddocks vision and just some incredible insights into his journey and where the firm is going in the future. So we're really looking forward for you guys to joining us for that one. In the meantime, we really hope you enjoyed episode 1 and enjoyed the interview with Michael and Adam.
Amazing.
Thank you for tuning in to the Day 1 series brought to you by Maddocks on the Mic. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe to wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode of the show. For more information on any of the topics discussed in this episode, visit our website, maddocks.com.au.
This podcast is for reference purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice and should not be relied on as such. You should always obtain legal advice about your specific circumstances.